but we could get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to this meeting of the Concord Municipal Light Board. We have an action-packed agenda today. We will give the early part of the meeting to a discussion of ETS rates. But let's talk about the minutes. John, I believe you have one set of minutes to request approval of.
Yes, I earlier this week distributed a revised set of minutes for October 8th, and if there aren't any proposed edits to those minutes, I move that we approve those minutes.
I'll second.
And Brian.
Well, Chris, do you have a question?
Oh,
He's trying to unmute. Hold on. Sometimes boxes pop up in front of the unmute button, so sorry about
Yep,
that.
I'm sorry. I was just asking to be unmuted. I was going to second, but Brian beat me to it.
great. Okay. So do you approve, Chris?
Yes.
And John?
Yes.
And I approve as well.
And I do as well.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
Thank you. Good. So there's no chair's report. Let's go into the rate hearing on ETS rates. Can I hear a motion to enter into a rate hearing? And welcome, Bianca.
There's some lingo we have to use for this.
Yeah, just
right?
decide to suspend the meeting, the regular meeting, and enter into a rate hearing.
So I'd like to make a motion that we suspend the regular meeting and enter into a rate hearing right now.
A second?
Second.
Okay, and John?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Bianca? Oh, they have to unmute you,
One
Bianca.
second, Bianca. There we go. I just clicked the button.
Hi,
Bianca.
me. Looks like I'm 3 minutes late and we're jumping right in, right?
Yeah,
Okay, sounds good. Yes.
and I approve as well. So we're going to do a rate hearing, and let me tell you how we're going to do it. The first is that Jason and Laura are going to give a presentation. At the end of the last meeting, we decided we should have at least a couple of clear proposals on the table for the board to review. Jason and Laura are going to present two proposals and go through a presentation about that. During that time, I would like the board to only ask questions of clarification of the proposal and not say anything that even hints at an opinion or expressing a view about anything. Then we're going to go to comments from the public about ETS rates, and we will limit that to 20 minutes ideally and 25 minutes if necessary, but we will restrict that time for public comments. After that, the board will discuss the proposals. The board could decide to accept one of those proposals. They could decide to combine the two. The board could decide to do something different. We're not restricted to those two proposals. Any questions for the board before we get started? Okay, Jason and Lori, you're on.
All right, thank you. You guys see this?
Yep, we're
Great.
all set.
All right.
Well, good morning, everyone. Here
All right.
we're going to, as Warren said, talk about a couple different potential ways to transition those customers who are currently on the ETS rate, a special rate, to time of day. So we're going to have the next slide, Jason. And the two proposals that we're going to look at, the text that's in white as opposed to gray means that both the options share that feature. So for example, if both option 1 and option 2, all residential and commercial ETS customers would remain on the ETS rate in 2026. Nobody would be switched to time of day in 2026. After that, the two proposals differ in the annual increase that would be applied to the ETS rate. Option 1 applies 2% increases, and option 2 applies 5%. And we're going to look at a visual chart of this in a moment. Those annual increases would continue until such time that a limit is reached. In the case of option 1, that limit would be 55% of the time of day standard super off, of the time of day blended rate. So what that means is back when ETS, when we looked at what the ETS rate was compared to the R1 rate, it was about 55% of the total R1 rate. So the proposal here in option 1 is to apply those 2% increases until such time that the ETS rate reaches 55% of the blended time of day rate. And you'll see those numbers in a moment. In option 2, the 5% increases would be applied until the ETS rate equaled the standard super off-peak time of day rate. For 2027, both options share the feature that as each customer's system fully reaches 20 years on the ETS rate, they would move as a step function to the time of day rate. So if a customer, has been on the ETS rate for 18 years at the beginning of 2027, then they would move to the time of day rate in 2029. They'd stay on that special ETS rate with the 2 or 5% increases until 2029, and then they would move to the time of day rate. So in option 1, the last effective date of the ETS rate would be December of 2034. That's when, the last person would still be on the ETS rate. In option 2, the ETS rate would actually cease to exist at the end of 2030. But also with option 2, it has the feature that there's a buyout of any remaining 20-year savings, which we'll define in a moment. So if at the end of 2030, you still had 4 years left, you only had been on the ETS rate for 16 years, you would receive a buyout, which we'll describe in a moment. And the other feature in option 2 is that ETS customers would receive a winter months load control credit. The proposal is $20. We can talk some more about the appropriateness of that level. Okay, next slide, please. So this is a graphical representation. The green line at the top is the time of day super off-peak rate. So in 2026, that's about 20 cents. But then if you remember in 2027, the rates change so that the spreads between each time period get bigger, which means the super off-peak gets cheaper and the on-peak gets more expensive. But we're just looking at the off-peak right here. So it's forecasted to drop from 20 cents to a little over 17 cents in 2027. And then for the purpose of this study, we're just making the assumption that that rate would stay flat over this study period. In reality, rate pressures may have that rate go up or down. We don't really know, but we're just assuming flat. So the blue line below is option number 2, which is the 5% increases. So we're starting off at about 10.4 cents. We'll look at that again in a minute. And at the 5% increases will go up until 2030. And then that ETS rate would end under option number 2. And the buyout period would be for the remaining 20-year lives between 2030 and 2034. Under option 1, you can see the 2% increases happen. And then in 2031, you can see that line flattens out. And that's because in 2031, if you apply the 2% increases, the ETS rate would reach 11.825 cents, which is 55% of the roughly 21.5 cent blended TOD rate. And so the ETS rate would then not increase by 2% per year, but would remain flat at 11.825 cents if the time of day rate stayed the same. I'm going to stop Warren and see, well, no, let's go one more slide and then we'll take questions. For people who do better with numbers rather than graphs, What this shows is the standard off-peak rate, as I mentioned, it's about 20 cents in 2026, and it drops to 17.39 cents in 2027. Under proposal number 2, there's that controlled rider credit of $20. Over to the left, you see under 2025, it says distribution charge 2 cents, energy 8.393. That 10.43 cents is what the ETS customers are paying today. So the 5% increase per year, it would go from 10.43 to 10.95 in 2026, then 11.5 in 2027, 12 cents in 2028, 12.68, 13.3 cents in 2030. So this red number is for example, in 2026, 10.952 cents minus the 20.117 cents of the standard super off-peak rate. So it's 9 cents cheaper. In 2027, the proposed ETS rate that climbs at 5% would be roughly a little less than a 6 cent discount to the 17.39 TOD rate in 2027.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Laura. It's the super off peak rate. You had said the blended rate when you started with what the delta was. So the delta is
I'm
the
sorry.
super off peak minus the ETS.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
So you can see that difference gets smaller over time because we're increasing the ETS rate while the TOD rate is remaining flat. So in 2030, the proposed ETS rate at the 5% increases is 13.312 cents. That compares to a time of day rate of 17.39 cents. So the difference is 4.078 cents. And that is the value that would be used to develop this buyout. So an example down below, if an ETS customer annually consumed 30,000 kilowatt hours, and they had 3 years remaining to the full 20-year term, they would be paid out this 4.078 cents times 30,000 times 3, which would be $3,670.54 for the customer using 30,000 and 3 years left. And then the other two examples, these customers use slightly less, 20,000 and 10,000, and they have different remaining years. And so you can see what the rebate levels are. I will tell you that the average and roughly the median as well of ETS consumption is about 20,000 kilowatt hours a year. If you go to the next slides, and I don't know if this is helpful for people, but we basically, what we put out in the table is just written out in long form here, if that's any more helpful for people to follow. But I think Warren, I would take questions at this time. As you said, factual or clarification questions about what the two proposals we're presenting here consist of.
John,
Laura, so this buyout there presumably would be a rate impact associated with that?
Yes.
And do we have an estimate of what that rate impact would be?
I could develop one. If we go to the, Jason, if you go to the spreadsheet. So let's say in 2030, we have, and this is just going to be a rough number, right? 47, 44, 32, 20, and 9 is 152 customers.
Well, it's not cumulative, Laura. It's just 47 are left, right? Because
Yes.
that number is
Oh,
drafted.
sorry.
And also, those numbers don't seem to match the original graph that you had shown. Because I had estimated that it would be a third would get the buyout.
Well, it's about 50 in 2030, so that's 47 is it's a little more than a third, but about a third.
Okay, yeah, you had shown a graph previously, and if you look at the 2030 mark, it's about that 32 customers remaining. So I'm just wondering if when you did the spreadsheet, you were off by a year.
Well, one thing I assumed in this is that people would enjoy the full year of the rate, even if, so let's say somebody reaches their 20-year life on February 2nd of the year. These numbers assume that they get to enjoy the ETS rate for that full calendar year. So if their system expires sometimes mid-year, they go all the way to the end of the year.
Okay, yeah. One of the slides coming up shows a large number of customers in that middle third, and I think we've just captured the tail end of that large group.
So anyway, to answer John's questions, 50 customers at
The next one is what I was referring to. Next slide.
times.
If you look at 2030 there, you get about 32 customers.
That's 30% though. That's not number of customers, it's percent of customers.
Correct. And we have
Oh,
100.
right. Based on 105 or 104, whatever.
John, you still have,
Yes, so no, I'm interested in that. I'm assuming there's no discounting that occurs, right? We're paying customers upfront for value that they would receive in the future. So one could say that it'd be appropriate to discount that value. I'm assuming that the calculation doesn't consider any discounting. And the other thing that I think warrants mentioning is we're assuming that the super off-peak rate in the ETS is flat, when I think in reality, it might escalate. So I just feel like there's an impact associated with that as well. And those
Yeah.
customers, non-participating customers are taking that risk, but
Are you assuming, John,
I-
that just one of them would increase or that they would both increase? Because we're really looking at the differential here.
well, yeah. Under this proposal, the rate that the ETS customers, that would increase by 5%, where we're assuming that the standard super off-peak is flat from 2030 on, when I would
Yeah,
expect that
okay.
there's probably rate pressures there, so therefore the difference would be lower. But
So,
just,
so
so in the proposal, it was the adjustments to the rates would happen as normal. So 28, we start adjusting for the market like we normally do. And then 5% would be added to those adjustments. So as the super off peak goes up and down, the ETS will go up and down plus 5%.
I think John was talking more about the buyout calculation.
buyout, exactly.
John, let me go to Chris.
I guess I'm just curious, are we just doing clarifying questions here? Or
Just
are we...
clarifying
Okay,
questions.
I'm going to hold
please.
mine and
Brian.
On the first slide, when it kind of compares the two,
Mhm.
there is no load control credit for option one. And I also wanted clarity on the 55% of TOD, and Laura gave that, which was the average time of day rate. So a fixed rate equivalent of the TOD, 55% of that. It's not 55% of the lower rate, and your graph represents that. And it would run the program would continue to run for another 10 years versus 5 years with the buyout. And also each customer, as they reach their 20-year mark, would experience a near doubling of their expense the following year. So customer shock is a
Hey,
big
Brian, you're starting to give your opinion, please.
No, I'm stating what
Yes.
happens. Not what this is not my opinion.
But,
But that was my last comment.
okay, thank you. On the issue of the load control credit, that could conceivably be added to option one as well. I think it was proposed when option two was proposed, and wasn't thought of when option one was initially proposed. So conceivably that could be added, or option two could be adopted without the load control credit. Any other clarifying questions so far? Laura, do you want to continue with additional slides?
Well, let me ask if everyone kind of understands the two proposals that have been put on the table. Because some of the other slides really just walk through like the written out form of each element.
Yes.
So if people are comfortable that they kind of get what's on the table, then I don't think we need to go through. The other slides are more background and were included in the previous presentation.
Do you want to
Okay.
mention, Laura, why the blended rate as opposed to the super off-peak, just to clarify?
So if you go, Jason, down to the rate slide, the historical rate slide, I think it has a dark background. That one. So when ETS first came out in this chart in 1998, the rate was 4.5 cents. And at that time, the R1 rate was 8.182 cents. And so the 4.5 was 55% of the R1 rate. And over time, like up to about 2004, it stayed roughly at that differential. But you can see the differential began to widen, in the 2013, 2014, when ETS was only going up to 6 cents, but the R1 rate went up to 13 cents. And so the proposal now is in the 2% rate increase is to allow the rate to increase 2% per year, which is what the cost of service study consultants recommended for rate changes. For example, next year, as we try to rectify the mismatch in cost of service for our commercial customers, we are raising small commercial rates 2%, and we're lowering medium and large commercial rates 2%. So the 2%, that's sort of the basis of that recommendation, was what the cost of service study consultant said. And so we said, let's raise it 2%, but up to the point where it gets back to 55% of the R1 rate, whatever that is. So in 2025, that's 20.713 cents, and 55% of that would be whatever that is. 0.20713 times 0.55, 11.4 cents. So we basically let the ETS rate keep going up 2% a year from 10.43 up to 11.4 cents. And then it would sort of stay at that 55% differential.
And I think the point here that I was trying to stress is that the R1 rate in 1998 was a rate meant to encompass all times of the day. And so if you were comparing the R1 rate to the super off-peak rate, it's not a fair comparison, because now we're charging a rate based on the time that you use it and actual cost, which wasn't done in the past. And is that, Laura, why you use the blended?
Yes, and so because we're the blended rate represents what the old R1 load shape was. So it's an equivalent from a pricing perspective.
Okay. Chris, you have a clarifying question.
I do have a clarifying question this time. So if I look at slide 6, which is just ahead of this on rate transition option 2, it says that ETS customers receive a load control credit once they're off the ETS rate, I guess. And does that exist in option 1? Because it's not on the option 1 slide. And if not, why is it different?
So first of all, the $20 credit would apply while they're still on the ATS rate. So that's in contradiction to what you just mentioned or summarized. And no, option 1 currently doesn't include that. The way this evolved is that option 1 sort of came out of the last meeting. Option 2 was later proposed and included this feature of a load control credit. And that's why it's not included in option number 1. It wasn't contemplated at that time.
But
Sorry.
to Juan's point, it could be added.
Yeah, I just want to just restate that and make sure I have it in my head correctly. So the $20 a month credit would apply once an ETS customer has transitioned to the time of day rate, not while they're also on the ETS
Okay,
rate.
my mistake.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
'cause
that would
this is-
only
the-
happen after a buyout.
Yes.
So
That's
option
my understanding.
one, when they roll off after 20 years, they wouldn't get that.
No, so as any ETS customer that has a unit that's on the time of day rate has the freedom to operate that during any period. Now, logic would dictate that they would do it at the super off-peak. The reason for the credit, I believe, would be just to incentivize these customers to allow the utility to control their unit like they
Right.
have and continue to do that on the time of day rate.
Because
I'm missing why you don't want to do that in option one, I guess.
It was only when option one was developed, no one had thought of that
Okay.
idea.
All
So
right.
we should assume it would
we-
be done under option one
Okay.
because,
So it's the same in both. Fine.
yeah, let's assume it would be the same in both.
I do feel, Warren, obligated to mention that the $20 credit, which is kind of maybe, if you could think of it as 2 times a water heater credit, what 2 times a water heater credit is today, is not really proportional to the size of these units. The average unit size on an ETS is about 37 kilowatts, and they operate at about a 35% load factor, which means if the utility controlled it, we would expect to realize about 13 kilowatts of load reduction. If I take just the transmission value in the winter months, no capacity value, that would be equivalent to $200 a month per ETS customer rather than 20.
And is it
Okay,
possible?
well, let's come back to that issue when we actually are discussing this. So,
Okay.
Can we just agree that some kind of incentive needs to remain for ETS customers to be controlled by the utility, and that we will in the future do a study to get the correct value?
well, let's agree on the first part that some credit will remain. Let's decide whether we want to whether we want to do a study or whatever, but let's first decide on what option we're pursuing here. Laura, I had one question on your supplementary slides. You had that slide that shows all the different increases for different customers arrayed on a graph. I think it's the last slide.
Yeah.
Is there any order to those, or is that a random order?
That is a random order.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a random order. And this,
okay,
again, this is the impact of moving ETS customers from the current 10.43 cents to the full phase 2 TOD rate.
right, yes. And these numbers would be adjusted down if we offer that winter credit because the differential would not be as great then. But
Yes.
I just want to know whether these were by date of installation or anything. John?
No.
Yeah, Warren, I'm going to ask kind of a pointed question, and it's, I'm not really trying to sway things. I'm just really trying to understand option 2. So in option 2, as I see it, there's a risk that customers are taking based on the buyout. They're essentially, making a commitment in terms of, this is the value that you're foregoing. And I'm just trying to understand what's the rationale in terms of what benefits does
John, can we come to that when we
Sure.
have the discussion?
Yep.
And I'll make that the first question. Okay?
That's fine.
Thank you. So now what we want to do is I want to turn to comments from the public.
I'd like to do one more clarifying question.
Sure.
On the credit, the control credit, you said that the transmission value would make that credit more and more valuable just on the transmission alone, but they would be transitioning to the super off-peak, which is guaranteed not to incur the expense of transmission. So I don't know if that logic applies. But this is why I'd like to have it looked at.
Well, yeah. let's talk about that when we're talking about what we're going to do. What I want to do now is turn to public comments, and we're going to restrict this to 20 minutes of public comments. Is there anybody in the public who would like to make a comment? I want to thank those folks. We got quite a few written comments from people, and I found them useful. Please raise your hand if you want to make a public comment. And I really, Pamela, unless you have something very specifically about ETS rates, I would like to give priority to folks who have ETS systems. So you think about whether you have something very specific about that, and I'm going to go to Peter Monahan.
Hi, everybody. Peter Monahan, 203 Monson Road. My comment, like all this started about fairness and how it's not fair for the non-ETS customers to subsidize ETS customers, even though there's precedent for that, as Jason had mentioned in the last meeting. I'm disappointed that we're fighting over what is essentially $1.88 a month. And in exchange for a shock to the system. So one thing I would ask is that you not based all of these options on the installation date. This assumption that we've gotten payback after 20 years is incorrect. You've gotten several emails about that. I'm one of them, where if I had stayed with oil, it would have cost less. So I have not gotten payback. And the other thing is that even if you say, like a customer's had a rate for the system for 18 years, you're only giving them 2 years of warning. Or if the customer's had it for over 20 years, you're giving them almost no warning. So this is a change to the contract. You're essentially wanting to say, hey, we're going to get you on this new rate. At this point in time, the fair thing to do is just say, as of at this point forward, you've got 10 years to either get off the system or get onto the new rate. And that is the fairest thing, because none of us knew this was going to change 20 years ago or 15 years ago or 10 years ago, whenever we installed the system. So this arbitrary basing all these options on this arbitrary installation date is just not fair. And it's this whole thing about saving $1.88 a month because it's not fair, then use that same argument to not shock the system, give us enough warning that's commensurate with the amount of money we're talking here. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars to switch off of this. We're talking about hundreds of dollars a month that is on top of other things that the town is slapping onto us, whether it's real estate assessments, or even just macroeconomic stuff like inflation. So that's my point, to stop basing it on installation date, to set, all right, this is all going to end in 10 years. Sure, do the 2% thing to sort of make sure that it climbs at the right same rate as the other residential rates, but stop basing it on installation date. That's my point.
Thank you. Pamela Dritt.
I'm perfectly happy to wait till the last. I believe that we should not give some of the value that ETS customers and solar customers and so on create for the whole community. We should give all of it to them in order to incentivize more people to do that, and less people to put, because they save all of us immense money. ETS acts like battery storage units that CMLP can control. And I think what Laura Scott said about what the benefit to CMLP for doing that monthly in financial terms should at least be given, enough of it should be given back to the ETS customers, that it incentivizes more people to turn to ETS, because ETS helps the system entirely in lowering the rates for everyone.
Thank you, Pamela. I am not seeing any other public comments. I want to give one more chance before James Reicheld. I'm sorry if I spelled your name, pronounced your name wrong.
Fine. Hey, it's nice to see some old friends here. I owned ETS from 2013 to 2023. I just want to chime in. I was reached out to several people reached out to me as I was very involved with the ETS community as a resident of Concord. In short, I don't see ETS as rates as a subsidy. It's a program, a town program, like adding bike lanes or having parks or other opportunities for the town. It's also obviously from the standpoint of green initiatives was very important. I realize it hasn't turned out to be as green as we might want because the electrical grid isn't as green as we'd like it to be. However, I would argue that these are not subsidies for people with ETS. This is a town program. And I think at risk is the town's reputation in supporting programs like ETS and solar that may or may not come in and out of the political favor. I think the town needs to stick behind the ETS customers as best they can. And I would argue that these are not subsidies, but this is a town program which needs to be supported long term. That's all I want to say. It's a wonderful town, and God bless. Thanks now.
Thank you very much. Curtis Geckel.
Yes, hello, thank you. Yes, I'm one of the ETS customers. I don't know the date that I actually got on, that we installed our full house ETS system. And yes, I am one of the individuals sent an email in. I guess just a short and sweet, the town and our home made an agreement. It was a complete understanding relative to the ETS system and the costs that we took on, and the suggested promises that the town suggested that we would garner from a cost savings. As I shared in my email, those have not been substantiated. And I think the get off the system within 20 years is a complete arbitrary number, not based on any sound understanding of what we did as homeowners once upon a time. So I think in all good stead by the town needs to stick by the agreement. I've not come to the town at all during this whole period in time and caused a ruckus at all or any conversations on unrealized financial benefit, because it was unrealized. But I did make a conscious decision. I should have done more homework at the time, and as I suggested in my email, but I didn't. The town needs to stand by the agreement as I've stood by my side of the agreement.
Thank you. Well, seeing no other public comments, let's go to discussion among the board. And John, let's go to your question or comment first, and then Chris.
I'm just trying to understand the rationale in terms of option 2, in terms of the Laura, if you have a view or someone has a view in terms of the buyout, we're making assumptions regarding, what are rates, and we're, making a payment to customers. What do non-participating customers get by this option? What warrants that buyout rather than just keeping customers on the rate?
I think Laura's muted.
Yeah, Jason, do you want to take that question?
So what benefits? So I think the point of the buyout, right, is that the ETS program or special rate can end earlier, but yet there could still be some financial compensation for those folks. I think that an argument that was made at the last board meeting was that special rates are definitely undesirable because of the complexity and the very issues that we're talking about today and that customers are reaching out about is, when does that promise end? So I think the purpose of the buyout is to end the program earlier, but still provide some fixed amount of compensation for folks so that we can wipe that program off the books and feel like we've yet still continue to promise to make sure that people got a certain number of years of that credit.
There's also reduced administrative work. We we're going to have 9 customers that final year or 4 customers that final year. And we can't make rates for individuals. We have to make rates for classes of customers.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I guess a follow-up to that is wondering if this is going to become an annual discussion of the ETS rates. And if there's no buyout, is that, are we having the same conversation in 6 years, 7 years?
We had this discussion in 2014 and we had transition plans and we're still talking about it.
Yeah. So now, any other board members could make any comments or express any views that they would like about any of this.
Yeah, I'd love to chime in.
Please.
So I have a few thoughts. First, time of day was developed to create incentives for consumers to reduce their consumption during peak hours, because these peak hour prices have an outsized impact on rates across the board for all of us. ETS was the brainchild of the light plant, and it's supposed to be controlled by the light plant. So I think that time of day rates for ETS customers is not relevant. Now, I think it's apparently like an ETS customer can turn on the system at a different hour or whatever. So I think a better one that is in keeping with CMLP's ETS program would be to say that, ETS customers can opt in to have the CMLP fully control their systems and keep prices relatively the same or increasing at, the same rates, or move to a time of day where they can, they can have control over the system. But this was CMLP's program. CMLP created it. CMLP advertised it. There was no signed contract, but contracts come in both explicit and implicit terms. And I would call this, from everything that I've heard, that this was absolutely an implicit contract with the community. At our core, we are a company by residents and for residents, and it takes years to build trust, and it takes less than a minute to squander all of it. At $130,000 per year in estimated cost, I don't think that this is a relevant topic for us to be discussing. And I think we should also consider what happens. And I can imagine that this could hurt some people very badly. And if it does, then I don't know if they go to the DPU, and if this becomes something that becomes a forever discussion with the DPU. Equality and equity are very different things. And to hurt a small portion of our community for $130,000 in savings that absolutely none of us will feel makes no sense at all to me. And I think what we should be discussing is an entirely different option. I don't think time of day rates applies. I think CMLP should have full control of the system. If a customer does not want to abdicate control, then they can pay the time of day rates. But CMLP should have full control. It is CMLP's brainchild. It was a mistake, and mistakes happen, but you don't push it off to the small group of people that you talked into it. That's what I have to say.
Okay. Before we go further, Jason or Laura, do you want to clarify what control we currently have over these systems?
Yes, thank you. That's why I raised my hand. I just wanted to clarify. So currently, kind of the bargain that ETS customers get is that we do fully control those systems. They are only allowed to charge 4 hours a day, except in winter or when there's very, very cold temperatures. And Laura, then they're allowed to charge 4 more hours
No, no, no. So they're allowed to charge
overnight.
8 hours every single weekday from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So we fully control them. They are they are turned on, but they're shut off all day. They're turned on at 10 p.m. They're turned off at 6 a.m. And that is the rule for the year. When it gets cold, if it gets below certain temperatures, they're allowed to run for between 1 and 4 more hours. So if the temperature in the morning is between 30 and 45 degrees, they get an additional hour. If the temperature is less than 10 degrees, they get 4 more hours. But CMLP chooses when those hours are. So we typically choose the cheapest hours of the day to give them that 1 to 4 hour boost. Might be 11 to 3, it might be 12 to 2. It's never during the evening peak. So CMLP is in full control of when those additional hours occur.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, so I wasn't on the light board or even in Concord, I don't think, when the ETS was originally rolled out. But I do very strongly hear that there is an implicit contract and an obligation. That said, we didn't write a blank check. It can't go on forever. Having some phase out seems completely reasonable to me. Whatever date we pick is going to be arbitrary. 20 years feels like about the right time. If I'm not mistaken, people, once they roll off the ETS, would still be able to control their system to take advantage of time of day rates. So if they chose to run that system in the middle of the night, that would still benefit them. So I'm generally supportive of option one. I think the buyout piece just is a little clunky and may have some unintended consequences depending on what rates actually look like in the future. So I prefer option one, but again, I think we're on the right track.
Brian?
I have a question for Laura. The residential assistance program, that income qualified residential assistance program, what do we spend on that every year? Would you say it's more or less than the 130,000 that we're spending on ETS customers?
You're muted, Laura.
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I mean, the benefit is pretty substantial. It's almost 14 cents for the first 657. So let's see, 14 cents.
In the past, we've targeted a 50% subsidy.
Yeah, but you asked how many dollars, right?
Yep.
And I think we have about 150 customers on that. So I think it's slightly more. It's probably 150 to $175,000.
Okay, and that was voted on by the town that we should have that program. It is every year or to enter the program, they have to verify income. This is something that the community has agreed we want to subsidize. ETS is a program that we thought would save us money, is not saving us money. And it may have had an implicit contract, but it did not have any guarantees. And it's, I think 20 years is quite fair. As for my opinion on the options, Warren, the option one keeps the status quo for 20 years, and then each customer will go through a 45% rate increase when they get off the program. The option two brings that delta of 45% lower and lower and provides them funds to do a capital investment into a new system or to have money prepaid to fund the ETS operations. So I'm in favor of option two because it reduces that rate shock and allows customers the knowledge of when the transition plan will affect them. And I think it's important that we communicate with customers, individual customers, and send them a letter to say, whatever decision we make, this is when it's going to be effective and when it will hit you personally so that they can start to plan their transition. No customer, even those that are at 20 years today, will be affected until the 2027 rate change. So people have some time to prepare. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I have to say I was surprised in terms of how moved I was by Bianca's comments. I think she's raising some fair points, though I have to say I kind of align with where Chris is. I feel like, there is while there is an implicit contract here, the assumption was that the ETS systems were going to have a 20-year useful life, and we're effectively acknowledging that. I understand that maybe the savings that were anticipated haven't been realized. That's decisions that we all make, and I realize that the light plant has some responsibility there because they were advocating for it. I think there's a lesson to be learned there. But I think that where I align is probably most with option one. Brian raised an interesting point in terms of option two. There's some value there in terms of providing some funds to help the affected customers, mitigate the cost of replacing their ETS system. But I just feel like option one is just a more straightforward approach.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to put my 2 cents in as well. I think I'm pretty closely aligned with John and Chris on this. To the extent to which there was an implicit contract in the promotional materials for ETS, it suggested a lifespan of 20 to 25 years. So there was an implicit expectation that people who adopted this technology would get at least 20 years out of it. There was no necessarily expectation they would get 30 or 35 years out of it. I do think the idea that Brian had proposed of the winter credit is a good one for being able to continue to control the system. That will reduce some of the rate shock for customers. I do think because if we do either proposal 1 or 2, it would not go into effect until 2027. There's a little time to figure that out and really do some analysis to figure out what the most appropriate winter credit for those folks would be. I must say I do feel bad for those folks who did not experience the savings that seemed like would occur from adopting ETS. But there were also other customers who got more savings than anticipated, in part because of the way rates have increased. For some folks, the savings have been greater than what it would have been if they had stayed with their previous system. And it's hard to do a policy based on just a few folks who didn't experience the expected savings. Finally, I do have some sympathy for the comment Peter was making about the the transition period and giving warning, although there's been a lot of discussion of ETS over the years. I mean, I know this isn't a major change, but I wonder about proposing, instead of starting it in 2027, to start on and have the rates change on June of 2027, make the rate change on January of 2028 with the beginning of that year, which would give everybody a little more time for the transition.
That's 2 more years of the existing rate, Warren.
That's 6 months more than we're saying under either of the proposals. I mean, it is keeping it, we're debating between a year and a half and 2 years then. Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that if we're leaning towards option one, that we discuss whether or not we want some kind of buyout of option one, to provide customers that have younger systems more of a rebate to allow them to transition to some other system should they decide.
So, personally, I'm not, if you could make the case again for it, because personally, I don't see that if these systems were designed to get at least 20 years out of them, I'm not sure why we should be trying to push people off of them before 20 years.
Because we're subsidizing them.
But it's still it's providing them with heat there. And,
We've
and if you
shown-
buy them out, you're subsidizing them too. Either way, you're subsidizing
Right.
the same amount. It's just a question of when they're getting the money.
Our analysis in previous meetings has shown that these systems do not provide value to other customers. They take value from other customers. So buying them out early, getting them onto another system adds value to other customers.
And Brian, you've just broken the trust in everything. Why would anyone buy anything from and trust CMLP for anything going forward?
We have a responsibility to
We have a
the
responsibility
ratepayers.
for the town, for the residents. We are for residents, by residents.
Yeah.
We should
I-
care about small groups of people that are like massively affected by these penny changes that you will not feel in your electric bill, and neither will I, and neither will anyone.
Well, I feel like that is a rather targeted statement that paints me in a bad light. I am trying to advocate on fairness throughout the rate structure, because in the last 3 cost of service studies, we've shown that these customers have a very high subsidy, and there has been no mandate, as there is with our rate, our low income programs, for us to provide that subsidy.
You are
So
absolutely right. It's unfair, but equality and equity are two vastly different things. If
yeah,
you make
so
everybody
this
equal,
is why
it
there's
does
5
not make
members on the
everybody
board.
equitable.
Well,
So,
I'm going to let Warren continue on.
what?
I'm just letting you move on. I'm not going to go back and forth.
No, I mean, I guess I do want to question that one thing, Brian, on the buyout. I
Yeah.
guess I don't see why the buyout is better for the rate for CMLP, in the sense that we're saying we're subsidizing these customers, and the buyout just pays the subsidy all at once. If you do it after 20 years, you're paying the subsidy longer, but it's the same amount of money. I don't see how we benefit.
It's really a benefit to the ETS customers, because they get a lump payment that allows them to make a change if they wish, or to just hold on to it and pay the time of day rates and lower our administration burden. So there is benefits to it. I'm considering that the buyout is a good idea to help the people who are upset about the situation we're in right now, because it ends the discussion. It leaves them with funds to make a decision, either to save that money and continue to pay the ETS for the time of day rates, or they can take that money and buy a heat pump, or they can put it towards an oil furnace, whatever they wish to do. But it allows them to make the change because it provides the capital. And for the light plant, it lowers the amount of subsidy we do in future years. And it reduces the administrative burden of managing this special rate for these customers.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, the buyout in option 2 would only apply to roughly a third of the ETS customers, if I'm reading all the charts correctly. So, I think then it starts to be an equity issue among different groups within the ETS that I don't want to go down. The only benefit that I see to the buyout is just that it simplifies the billing and ends the discussion of it forever. And I think it's better to just play out the 20 years for everybody versus doing that.
Well, you'll be on the board longer than I will, Chris, so you'll
Well,
experience this in future years.
We'll see. No one knows what the future holds, right?
Well, I would like to make a motion that we adopt Jason.
I wanted,
And Pamela, just to note, I'm not taking any more public comments at the moment. Jason.
I just wanted to clarify as the board seeks to make a decision here. When you talk about that credit, I know that Laura had presented different options, and I think Brian had put one on the table as well. So I would just ask that when the board does make a motion and takes a vote, that it is as clarifying as possible on what the intention is, so that
Yes.
we know how to administer it.
I would like to make a motion and put it on the table, and then we could discuss it and folks can amend it as necessary. I move that we adopt option 1 with 2 changes to it. That option 1 go into effect on January 1, 2028, with all changes in future years to be effective on January 1 of the following year. Secondly, that there be a winter credit given to customers who continue to have their systems controlled by CMLP, the amount of that credit to be determined at a time in the future. And I guess those are my only 2 changes to it. So option 1 with a load credit at an amount to be determined, and secondly, for it to go effect on January 1, 2027. Is there a
Sorry,
2028, excuse me. Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Is there discussion of that?
The option 2 should also be the TBD, not the $20.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
And how are we going to vote on this? Are we going to just do an up or down on option 1 and up or down
Well,
on option 2, or a selection?
There's a motion on the floor, so we have
There's a
to vote on
motion.
that.
Yeah, at the
just a
moment, there's a motion. If somebody wants to put in an amendment to that motion, they would put in an amendment and we'd vote on the amendment first, and then we would vote on the option second.
When we vote, can we assume that if option 1 does not pass, we'll be voting on option 2?
No, we would assume we would be voting on something else.
Okay.
We would, if option 1, if this doesn't pass, then someone else could put a different option on the table, which could be option 2, or it could be something else.
All right. Do you want to call the vote?
Yeah, if no one, yeah, let me call the vote.
I had a clarifying question.
Yeah, please, Chris,
The
sorry.
winter months load control credit, I'm still confused. That only applies after the customer is off the ETS rate, or it applies?
Yes,
Okay.
after they're off the ETS rate.
Thank you.
Yeah, because they're in effect already. The ETS rate is in effect the credit that they get currently is what they're getting for having the system controlled. Okay, let me take a vote on this. Chris,
Yes.
Bianca,
No.
Brian,
No.
John,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. So this passes. Thank you very much.
So I just want to clarify, that means that the ETS program will end in 2034.
Yes.
Do you want to take a motion to exit the rate hearing, Warren?
Oh, yes. Can we have a motion to end the rate hearing?
So moved.
Brian, thank you. And can I just see a show of hands? Okay, we're out of the rate hearing. Thank you. Uh, Jason, do you think we have time for the preview, or should we move on to the solar at the middle school?
My preference would be to move into executive session, but first take any other public comment that does not pertain to ETS.
Okay, well, let's do that. Any public comment on anything? Pamela Dredd.
1 second. There you go.
I have a question. When we doesn't the town benefit from individuals installing solar and ETS systems, which act like batteries or the equivalent of batteries, right? Doesn't the town benefit from those? I don't understand why you think the ETS program was a failure when it saves the town massive amount of peak shaving money.
It was a mistake, Pamela. CMLP made a mistake.
It doesn't save on, so their rate is so low that they don't save on expenses.
Yeah, basically, I think that's the right way to put it, is
But-
that there are benefits to the town,
Yeah.
but the costs outweighed the benefits.
What
And-
cost don't we want more electricity use in order to more cheap green electricity use? How does
If
What-
you're not
what ex-
recovering the costs associated with that electricity use, then there's not a benefit.
But we are, because we spend money as a town to buy batteries and solar installations. Those are investments. Aren't these the equivalent investments only by the local
ETS is
residents?
not a battery, Pamela. It's just a really basic heater, and it's inefficient, and it doesn't really work well. It's just a mistake, and mistakes happen.
Well, thank you, Pamela. I guess what we need, Jason, is a motion to go into executive session. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And with a notice to everybody in the public who's on the call, we will not be coming out of executive session. When we're done with the executive session, the meeting will end. And the reason why we're going into executive session, just so folks know, is to discuss bids for the solar at the middle school, and that information is information that can't be made public because these are individual bids.
Well, just to clarify, the bids themselves are public. The power supply contracts we'll be discussing surrounding
okay.
them are not public.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Okay, can we have a motion to go into executive session?
And this does need to be made from the screen, so that's why I've got it up here. So, and you need to mention exemption number 10, and that we will not be returning into regular session, as Warren said, in the motion, please.
Would you like me to?
Yeah, please, Brian, thank you.
Pursuant to Commonwealth of Massachusetts open meeting law, propose a purpose for executive session number 10 to discuss the trade secrets or confidential, competitively sensitive or other proprietary information provided in course of actions conducted by a governing body as as an energy supplier.
And
Sorry,
not,
it's still 6 a.m. for me. I'm still
okay.
tired.
And just mention not to return in open session.
Yes, and we will not be returning to regular session once we go into executive session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I,
Second,
thank you, John. And John,
yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Bianca,
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
And I am as well. And thanks to everybody who joined the meeting from the public. I appreciate your participating in the light board, and I know there'll be some disappointed folks among the ETS community. I do believe we have tried to come up with something that's fair for everyone, that ensures that there's no precipitous action and that you get the benefit of your ETS system for at least 20 years. So thank you.